today, what I want to do is break down this paper that just dropped. Uh, this is fascinating. It's called Decentralized Society, Finding Web3's Soul. And so it's Glen Weyl, I'll probably pronounce these names wrong, Puja uh, uh, Ohlhaver, and then this other guy named Vitalik Buterin. I don't know. I've never heard of him. No, just kidding, of course. So I think this is critical too. So I want to just read the abstract and go over how, when I first saw this, what I thought they were saying, and then dig into what they're proposing, and then also show this then in context of basically this prototype, this thing that I've been creating, which I would argue is one of many manifestations of what they're actually suggesting. So I know that's a lot, and and I'm sort of aware that when I begin these things, there's a point where I usually stop making sense for folks. So I'm going to try really hard. Thanks everybody for, sticking with me. People say that sometimes they have to listen to this twice or slow things down, and so, and that's on me. That's something that I'm working on, and I so appreciate the people who work with me. Right? Anyway, so let's read together the abstract of this paper. Right. So it says, Web3 today centers around expressing transferable, financialized assets rather than encoding social relationships of trust. First sentence. Okay. So what they're saying is, since the paper obviously wants to change your opinion or present a new idea, the new idea is that encoding social relationships of trust is going to be important. And that's not the same as what's happening, right? So what's happening is you have these NFTs, let's say, or you have these transferable financialized assets, right? So again, that's like an ERC20 contract. It's a token of some sort. It is what you traditionally think of as a token. If you crack open MetaMask and you look in the little token field, there is the token, and the token has been created using a standard mechanism. Okay? Now, So, yet many core economic activities, such as uncollateralized lending and building personal brands, are built on persistent, non-transferable relationships. Okay, so let's break this one down. Many core economic activities, such as uncollateralized lending and building personal brands, are built on persistent, non-transferable relationships. So, in the context of what we know, they're going to be talking about non-transferable tokens, right? So, an NFT is a non-fungible token, right? It's transferred, but this is a token that is not transferred, which means it stays with whoever creates it or whoever it's given to, right? So I could create a token of some sort, and we don't know what that exactly means, but I could give it to you, and then it's I think similar to the idea of a colored coin, right? That um, it's a different way to imagine tokenization. So in this paper, we illustrate how non-transferable soul-bound tokens representing the commitments, credentials, and affiliation of souls can encode the trust networks of the real economy to establish provenance and reputation. So let's read that one again. In this paper, we illustrate how non-transferable, soul-bound, so it's bound to a soul, and they say what a soul is later, represents the commitments, credentials, and affiliations that can encode trust networks of real. So what you're doing is you're using Web3 to establish your brand, just as you might do with Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever, right? You're doing it in Web3. Now, that could mean that you have a special tool, a piece of software, an incredible new piece of Web3 software that's going to do this. But let's read on a little bit more. More importantly, SBTs enable other applications of increasing ambition, such as community wallet recovery, civil resistance governance, mechanisms for decentralization, and novel markets with decomposable shared rights. So that's a lot. That's a lot that these things that they're saying that they offer, right? And a community wallet recovery. Okay, what does that mean? Well, you know, many years ago, I created a patent at IBM, and the idea behind the patent was that you could take, you had to somehow solve the problem of the fact that if you encrypted something, you would have the encryption key, and if you lost the encryption key, you couldn't decrypt it, of course. But you know, you don't want somebody to steal the key. So the solution was sort of to create these different segments, and the segment had part of the key and the data all stuck together. And so if you could take two of these segments and stick them together, you had all of the data. But the idea was that the segments would be owned by different people, different individuals. And so maybe at this time, and this was really even before AWS took off, you could go to somebody who was holding your data and say, look, I verify that this is me, even though I've lost access to this file. You can understand this is me, so please give me back my segment that you're holding for me. It's like you pull it out of the safe deposit box, right? You go to somebody else, some other person, and they don't correlate with each other, and they give you something. So it's this trust system. So you're moving the burden away from the machines, away from the mechanisms, to human trust systems. And I know that seems strange, like a strange assumption, but I do think that's part of what they're saying in this paper, and that's part of how I interpret that, right? Community wallet recovery, right? So things like that. For example, you could, let's say that, and they often I talk about churches, and they even talk about churches in this. So let's say that your church has access to your wallet. And when I say your church, I mean in the traditional sense that someone attends a church and they know these people in the real world, and they have potlucks, stuff like that. It's like somebody having It's like trusting somebody with the spare key to your house, and then when you're on vacation, you call and they go and they make sure that the dog gets fed or the water gets turned off. You should never leave the dog in the house when you're on vacation, by the way. But you get the point. So I think that's the point there. So let's move on. We call this richer, pluralistic ecosystem decentralized society, a co-determined sociality where souls and communities come together bottom up as emergent properties of each other to co-create plural network goods and intelligences at a rate of scale. That's a big one. We call this rich pluralistic ecosystem DECSOC, basically, Decentralized Society. And so again, this is going to be more reliant on people, right? And that's how you can have a network of goods. When they talk about goods here, I would say that they're talking about things, actual, tangible things, real world things, intelligences, and doing this at a range of scale. Right? Well, again, you can do that to scale if it's people doing it, and you're not always having to feed everything back into a mechanistic system. Now, why am I assuming that that's part of this? Well, let's go back to the very beginning here. And the important thing to me that jumps out is that these are not transferable. And much of the complexity of NFTs, of tokens, of smart contracts is in the transferring. So when you're dealing with something that's not transferable, you don't have any of those external needs, and so things can be much simpler. And that's what I've always advocated for, is a much simpler code base where you create your own reputation in the system, right? The promise here is that the soul-bound token built on persistent, non-transferable relationships will allow things like building a personal brand. All right, so let's see. Right here. So here's the actual paper, and kind of just looking at different parts of this. There's another section that I wanted to, so beyond the abstract, let's see, did I finish that? Oh, maybe I didn't finish it. Yeah, so let's see. They enable other applications. DSOC, okay, yeah, that was a big. So key to the sociability of decomposable property rights and enhanced governance mechanisms, wow, such as quadratic funding discounted by correlation scores that reward trust and cooperation while protecting networks from capital extraction and dominance. With such augmented sociality, Web3 can eschew today's hyper-financialization in favor of a more transformative, pluralistic future of increasing returns and social distance. So that's a lot, and I think I probably skipped a sentence in here. Right? So, and there's an element of this paper that I'm not going to address. Right? There's a lot of, I am not going to talk about quadratic, whatever they said, right? Because again, I believe that there's some fundamental points here, and there's some interesting things in how this paper intersects what I do and what I'm able to show. Okay, so having said that, now let's move forward and to the introduction. And yeah, let's see. I may not be able to find it, but one of the things that I previously quoted out of this is the concession that initially, starting out, that things could be done in a very public way, even though the authors of the paper are concerned with privacy. We're all concerned with privacy. I'm concerned with privacy. Yet, what I do is profoundly public. So I disclose profoundly public information about myself, which, and you bring it all together, and you will certainly come to some conclusions about me, but but they're not going to be mind-blowing. You know, you're not going to have my social security number or my driver's license number. You're going to understand what sort of music I enjoy, or what kind of movies, or my opinions on things, right? And these are manifestations of my personality that are captured in this very public, very simple system, which I have created and show over time. And so, gosh, where is that? There are a lot of good quotes in here. There's a lot of good stuff. Stairway of increasingly ambitious applications, right? So I'm at the bottom of the stairway because this doesn't have, again, that ambition of any privacy. Okay? So now with that in mind, let's see. Is there anything else I see here? Oh, here we go. Here we go. Okay, I think, yeah, this is when they begin to describe what a soul is. Let me read this. Okay, this is the piece. Our key primitive is accounts or wallets that hold publicly visible, non-transferable, again with the non-transferable, but possibly revocable by the issuer tokens. Okay? So again, we don't have examples of non-transferable tokens unless you change your idea of what a token is. And I have presented people with things and they've said, oh, that's a token. Okay, if you say it's a token, we'll go with that. But and I'll show you that in a bit too. So, but key here, our key primitive is accounts, right? So it's your account. This is my account. This is my address. Right? If I open up MetaMask, then you see this address. This is my address on the Wapstein network, right? I hit the MetaMask button, so sometimes it takes a while for it to open up. This is my address, and I can prove that is my address over and over again in different ways. If you have a website, I could go to that website and sign something as that address. I can use that address on a private network. I could add a private network to MetaMask, use that address to interact with something, almost as if in the way that we used to think about using Hyperledger Fabric or R3 Corda, right, for some sort of business or company that I might be working for. But anyway, so here's my address right here. It's the same as what you see here. So I'm looking now at myself through the Rothstein network. Also, this is key, and I think this is really important to stress. This is my address on the Polygon network. I could also show you my address on the Ethereum network itself. And on the Polygon network, you see, so you know then that I am the person that created these transactions. Therefore, encapsulated within these transactions is my reputation. And I would say that these transactions, such as this thing that says tell, I'm telling you something, these are in fact manifestations of, I guess, what you could call a non-transferable token, right? And if you look here, I've started this process even before using any sort of EVM solution at all. I started this process using Dogecoin and then Digibyte, right? So there's transactions going back many years that even go outside of this network that still together build my reputation, my identity. And this is in line with what the paper is arguing. This decentralized society. So you can understand, so someone that I might want to deal with here in Texas can come to understand what I'm about based on what I've publicly disclosed, and then we could deal together even in a private network, and they would see they're still dealing with this person. They're still dealing with me. There's right there, there's a public part and a private part, right? All neatly packaged into this. But right now, this is all public. So if you look here, you see that in fact there's 285 transactions on this Rothstein network, which is testnet, right? So so you're not going to come to any conclusions about my financial situation based on these, but you can come to understand the things that I would say and the way that I build a reputation around this address. And again, it's or account, as they say, right? Our key primitive is accounts or wallets that hold publicly visible, non-transferable, but possibly revocable by the user tokens. Okay, so I'm saying that this is a very simplistic version of that. So let's go back, and you can see, for example, I have a number of these that say talk, or one. And these are this is me using a simple smart contract that I wrote that you could also use. And if you use my smart contract, your address would begin to be enriched with these transactions where you are expressing your opinions, your pitch to the world, your whatever, right? So we go back. Let's see. If I click here, let's go back to the very first the beginning, the very first transactions that I did on this network to see, if you can begin to come to some idea about what I'm about. Okay, so I created, let's see, I created a contract. Looks like, oh, no, let's do this. Let's go to the last page, and you can look at that. And so again, what I'm saying is this is an example. I believe I have personally created an example of what I'm saying that they're arguing for in this paper. So the first thing that happens is we transfer in a small amount of testnet Ethereum, and I create a contract called URL. Okay, we transfer a little bit in, more from this account, and this gets to the idea of association, right? So now you see that I'm associated with this account, and in fact, you can see that over and over again. Right? You can see that, and so not only am I beginning to have a reputation, but this account does too. And this account, by the way, is the it's the fountain that it's the Moonborrow fountain that Kirfin Lobates runs. Right? That's what this is. That's what you see happening here. And so that's all part of the story that you can understand by literally reading this in a very real and human way. Right? So then we have this transaction here, and it's called record. Okay, so let's take a look. We're drilling down now into this thing, and you can read it. You can read this, and I have tools that make it easier to read this. Right? And this is written in a way where anybody can create tools to read this. That's the very private, that's the very public part of this. That's the concession that they're arguing you need to make here. Even understanding that privacy is important, but we're going to start out with public things. And so you decode this. What is the first public thing I say? And I'm showing you some I'm telling you what video I was watching. I was watching a YouTube video which is simply this song. So I was simply pointing you to the song I was listening to at the time. Right? And well, you might think, well, what does that tell us? Well, not particularly much on its own, but combine that with 285 other transactions where I tell you things, and you begin to get a sense of who I am, combined with the fact that this person, this identity, is not floating freely in this sort of new Web3 universe, metaverse, if you will, but I'm connected, right? I'm connected to the Rothstein fountain, for instance. I'm connected to anybody that I transact with, and the real gains here come when you begin to connect outside of the system, right? I connect this to my real world life, right? And that's I think something that may not be clear in the paper. I think they do a pretty good job of doing it, right? Let's see. The true power of this mechanism emerges when SBTs held by one soul can be issued or attested by other souls, right? So, so there are times when other people come into my universe, right? And I'm connected with them. They are attesting to my soul in the sense of this, right? And I'm attesting to theirs, right? If I respond to them, and you can see some of that in examples of this where we're not looking at this raw ether scan anymore, but we now look at the tools that I use to connect to this, right? So you can see now, here using this data puller, I guess, that I created, you can see where I'm talking. Or recently, I've been able to embed images directly into the transaction, which is probably new for the EVM world. It's not new in the world of crypto transactions in general, but for this in this case, it is relatively new. And it's kind of hit or miss. You have to. The miners will sometimes reject these because the images are pretty large, but it's interesting that you can do that now. So that again, you come to understand that I'm a person that has just injected these large images into the ledger. And yes, I have tools to read it, but it's possible for other people to create those same tools and read this same data without me. So, for example, while this transaction is an HTML link that just points externally, this one is a copy of this image. The image is actually larger, stuck in this transaction. And if you go, and again, all of this, so this tells you something about me, right? This tells you that these are my heroes, right? So now you know more than just that I am a fan of Ben Folds, but also Kernigan and Richie here creating Unix, right? That's what we're seeing here, the fathers of Unix in this very famous picture, which I have burned into the ledger at this point. We see other things, we see tests. Here in this Ropstein version. So this is a mirror of a Ropstein contract. So some of the same things that you would see here, right? The same data you can now understand in a more visually, in a way where things are translated from you. And you see other people, right? Like, hi from India. That's somebody who I don't know who they are, but this is their ID, right? This is their, and I click here. Now I'm beginning to understand this third person. It's not me. It's not Keir Finlow Bates. It's this third soul, or whatever the term is, soul token, whatever we're saying, in this decentralized society, right? So this person, this person transacted here, and it looks like they got 500 of these Ropstein Ethereum from this person. Well, who is that? Well, okay, I can click there, and the story just continues. We're all connected. We're all connected to each other. Now, I don't know who this person is, but they have a lot of these tokens, and so they now have a reputation. Right? This address to me suddenly, immediately has a reputation that I can understand as an entity that has somehow collected a bunch of these testnet tokens, and they're giving them out. You're giving them away, or maybe they're selling them, I don't know. But they're moving from this central hub to different people, right? This person got 3,000. Well, let's follow the rabbit trail even further. And if these people were to begin to use these very simple sort of contracts that I use, they could also express things just like the person that said hi from India did. Right? So, and it just goes on and on. It's a connected system. It's not only is it a connected system, but you can jump from one currency to another. Like I could say, okay, who is this? Who is this person right here? I can now look here and see that their manifestation, the manifestation of this cross-chain soul token, if you will, right? That look, oh, they're on BSC, they're on Ethereum, they're on Ropstein, they're on. So I could go to Etherscan, right? And again, by using these simple, non-transferable transactions to enrich things, that's what I think they mean when they're talking about this new kind of token. And because they're not transferable, they can be very simple. The things that I create, like this record function, right? Or this create URL. These are very, very simple. This is an example of the contract, and part of the soul experience of me is that there's a dog sitting right there. So you might see like a dog reference in something. Hear a recording where the dog is barking. It's all part of who I am and how my life is manifested in this system. Anyway, sorry about that. So if we look at this contract, that's it. That's the whole contract. There's almost nothing to it. In fact, there's more than there needs to be. This part here didn't need to be added. It's not very useful. The contract is literally does nothing. You give the data to the contract, and that's it. Because you're just marking the ledger. The fact that I ran the contract is all that was needed to happen. So, and now you can argue that this isn't a token. I don't really care what you call it, but I would say that this sort of thing is what's being called for in this paper. And again, by using something so simple as this, you can come to understand. I can talk to you. I could make you laugh or be angry at me. I, I could make you want to hire me or never want to hire me or want to work with me or not want to work with me. All things can be expressed in this system. All right, so here's, yes, this one is, if you look at it here, see, it's a PNG image. So this is, I think this might even be that dice image, right? That the contract here is simply not able to decode it, but it sort of can, right? Um, and again, you can decode it using this. So that's my take on this. I guess, you know, there's a lot of hypotheticals in the middle of this thing that I don't make any comment on. The thing that jumped out at me was that they advocate for doing things in a very public way, even though they're interested in privacy, and the token doesn't ever transfer, right? So these, if you imagine that I have all these tokens now, I have a box of tokens, 280 tokens that don't transfer to anything else. I just look at them as descriptors of my address, descriptors of my identity. And you know, they go into all sorts of hypotheticals that I don't address. Right here, of course, it's very, that's very simple to say, well, instead of me putting a picture here, I could make a hash, right? And the picture is in a private repository. The picture is an IPFS. It's submarined or hidden in some other way, and I just use that. I just put a hash on chain. That's pretty basic stuff, and that's it. So, yeah, cheating. Okay, so things like cheating, right? That if your address, if you do bad things as your address, if you do bad things in this system that I show, right? If I run a front-running scam and send the money to my address, well, now I'm a guy that likes Unix and Ben Folds, and I'm a cheater, right? So that just, screw the 280 records. That just is something that I indicted myself and messed up the whole record in an irreversible way immediately, right? So you wouldn't want to do that. But the key is also that you're not having a smart contract analyze this. You're not having AI necessarily look at this, right? People can make a judgment. You can read things. You interact with people, and you make a judgment in that way. You're not creating because this is a trustless system, right? You don't have to create a second trustless system on top of it. You're creating a trust system on top of it. And the only way to create a trust system is for things to be falsifiable. In other words, you have to give people a chance to lie, a chance to expose their bad behavior, so that you can say, well, we don't want to deal with it. But if the system can't conceive of that, it doesn't have a place for bad behavior, then no one is ever, that manifests itself in other ways, right? So, yeah, I mean, there's problems of gaming, but again, it's uh, I could have other accounts, and I do have other accounts other than this one that I've shown you, but um, like I say, this is the one that I would be I'm building my reputation against at this point. So that's like I say, it's a very interesting paper. That's how I interpret it, and I believe that it's important for people to enter this world and fiddle with things in the way that I have, and be okay with a certain level of disclosure, because again, it doesn't really matter what music I listen to or any of that. That's that's how I interact with this stuff. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I certainly enjoyed reading this.